Hey, folks, and welcome back to Let's Talk Mental Health. I'm Brian Wall, your host, with over 2 decades of experience across 4 countries in the areas of mental health and addiction, with hopes of promoting awareness for listeners that are seeking tips and tools to manage and/or boost their mental well-being. Tune in weekly as we share practical advice and expert insights for living your best life. The Let's Talk Mental Health podcast strives to offer inspiring stories of hope and recovery as our guests share their personal and professional perspectives on overcoming mental health related challenges and finding strength and resilience. For more information, be sure to follow us on all major social media platforms by searching 24/7 DCT and online at 247dct.org. This week's episode is yet another effort on our behalf to more closely track our tribe and bring awareness to issues like mental health, addiction, general wellness, and everything in between. So let's go ahead and get started by meeting this week's expert guest, Patrick Moore, with another opportunity to dig a bit deeper on what works and what don't work. Pat's a licensed professional counselor, creator of the Motivational Assessment Prevention Program, or MAP, and author of Prehab, Leveraging Perception to End Substance Abuse. The MAP model has produced results at colleges and high schools in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Pat's research focus is on the risk continuum for substance use disorders from prevention to treatment. His research uncovered causes and effective education methods for all risk levels based on developing affective risk response patterns. His research experience is complemented by his clinical experience with individual psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, and Myers-Briggs personality type assessments. Pat is also a contributing member and speaker for regional, national, and international conferences. Welcome to the show, Pat. How are you, brother?
Always good to talk to you, Brian. Doing wonderful. This is what I do, so this will be the best part of the day. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, man, rock and roll. We haven't talked in a while, but we've been working together to raise awareness and share your research findings with folks. And I put it on my posts sometimes, and on LinkedIn that I do my weekly trilogy, trying to get folks to track all that information because it's fascinating. And so I wanted to share some background with our listeners so they can kind of bring them up to speed a bit. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services report that approximately 16.5% of our population ages 12 and older meet the diagnostic criteria for a substance use disorder within the past year. That means about 1 in 7 Americans report experiencing a substance use disorder, with alcohol use disorder being the most common. According to the University of Utah's genetics department, although the precise genetic cause is largely unknown, scientists estimate a person's genetics account for 40 to 60% of their risk of developing an addiction. However, you believe your research reveals that if we simply cured every case of addiction in the country today, nothing would change tomorrow. And that's related to a lot of what I just shared. So tell me more, Pat.
It's an interesting problem. We tend to focus on the extreme end of the continuum because that's where all the help is needed. That's where people have run out of resources and they're crashing and burning and overdosing. So that's
Yeah.
tends to logically enough where we get involved because now we have to.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a problem until it's a problem, right? And then a lot of times it's too late.
A 5 alarm, air, air catching on fire.
I think you're on mute. I think you hit mute, Patrick.
It's excited
There you go.
from a long way away, but the we're so symptom oriented. We miss the causes,
Yeah.
and so that's what that means is when we don't look at use and abuse and the underlying causes, we just end up dealing with this severe addiction thing. And if we cured every case today, nothing would change tomorrow because they're all progressing today. The
Yeah.
ones that
Yeah.
are severe yet will be tomorrow.
Yeah.
Nothing changes. It's a and the amount of pain and cost is hard to calculate.
Yeah.
It's a different world if we get on top of this, and we haven't caught up to some of the research that has been done in the last 30 or 40 years that marketing people know about, politicians certainly know about, salesmen know about. If we had the average used car salesman
Mm.
knowledge about the affective risk response system, there would be no addiction today.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what
They
you
don't
said
have.
about that. You're into the why. I'm into the why as well. I think there's a lot to be said about those underlying causes, and otherwise we're just chasing symptoms. And so, really important to dig deeper and understand what is this all about. And you believe there's a connection between development and addiction. Share your thoughts on that. Fascinating to me.
Well, it used to be just the opposite. When I was going through school, the leader, one of the leaders in the country, wrote a book, a textbook, and accepted being taught in schools now, and
Hmm.
then and in collegiate recovery centers and those kinds of organizations across the country. And they know it has something to, and they were good at what they did. They just didn't go far enough.
Hmm.
So they helped me. So they said there's obviously something developmental going on here. And what we think it is a lack of development. So
Mm.
when I look at an alcoholic, I say, when did you start using? And they tell me 14 years old. Then I have an explanation for why you act like a 14-year-old.
Right. Exactly.
Because that's what it looks like. You stopped developing. And because you didn't have to, you had another source of alcohol or narcotics or whatever it is. The
Yeah.
drug really doesn't matter. And they used Erickson's developmental theory, and they settled on identity as the one part of the development process because that starts around 14 years old.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and
So
that's that prefrontal cortex piece, without developing, allowing that to develop in a healthy manner. We toss some drugs and alcohol in the mix, it's going to stunt the growth. And before you know it, we're 30 and we're making decisions with that part of our brain like a 14-year-old would.
makes sense. And that's what they decided. It kind of hooked up for them there. But as we get into it, I found that it didn't hold enough water.
Hmm.
Uh, and what I found was the kind of the opposite. Not only are addicts highly developed, they keep on developing, and it explains everything. Um, One of the tenets of CBT, why do people do what they do with their mental health problems, and how do we
Right.
help them? Well, a lot of counselors will tell you that the resistance they run into, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
How do you deal with resistance? They don't want it. How many clinicians and how many clients does it take to change a light bulb? Or remember that old joke?
Yeah, man.
Just one, but they gotta really want to change.
That's great.
It's not really resistance, but it looks like it. That's an
Hmm.
attribution error. It's what it is humans, all of us, cling to the familiar. The
Yeah.
familiar, the familiar is a superpower, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
We live by our habits, and if our habits are good ones, we have a pretty good life.
Yeah.
And if they're not good ones, but we think they're good ones, well, that causes just about all the pain there is in the world.
Yeah. I have folks a lot of times, working with kids, specialize in teens, and work with folks across the age range. But I enjoy most working with teens. I'll say that. The parents are sometimes the toughest part of that puzzle for me, and I get to share all kinds of stuff with them and educate them. And I think there's a lot of power in that. But they oftentimes come to me with questions of, oh, I want my young, it doesn't even have to be a teen, but my young adult son, my young son that still lives in the house, whatever, he's got this pattern of behavior. It's super dysfunctional and unproductive and not good. And how do we change all that? And after talking with them, you've done this long enough, within minutes, you can tell if this person is in it to win it or not, and I always tell the parents, when my common pieces of advice is, when the pain outweighs the benefit, that's when you'll see the change. Right now, this pattern of behavior is working very well for your son, and there's very little pain and a whole bunch of benefit. So until that balance flops, we're going to probably be dealing with the same thing. Hopefully, he lives through it, and we have a chance to change some of those patterns.
Yeah, they always love that message. Stop rewarding them.
Yes.
Oh.
I can't. It's hard. Now I have kids too. And do you have kids, Pat? I forget.
I do.
Okay. So I got two girls, and I'm learning it. Nobody gave me a handbook on this, and I kind of make it up as I go along. But couldn't agree more. It's hard not to spoil them, but I also very much can see the damage of the spoiling causes for sure.
It's a beautiful thing because in the end they get to be responsible for themselves as just as we get to be responsible for ourselves. I can't be responsible for anybody else, and I don't ask anybody else to be responsible for me. That's where the center of the problem tends to be.
Yeah.
If we don't organize these natural superpowers we have
Mm-hmm.
in the right pattern, we tend to be dependent, very dependent, and not know it and feel just the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a heartbreaking situation. Uh, and if and nobody can see it because nobody looks at it that way. So it's a perspective problem. So that's
Yeah.
why I built an empowerment model. I built an empowerment model just to measure prevention. If we're doing any good in prevention in colleges.
Right.
So what I did was just say here. Basically, I could just retitle it to "Here's how to become a raging alcoholic." Follow these 5 very easy stages, and use your strengths, and your goose will be cooked.
Yeah. Yeah. And so because we feel like and I've struggled with addiction myself, and so I can remember times that and I still have my days I think about, like, man, I really want to go out and smoke crack. I have those thoughts, but I don't act on them. And like I'm a believer, and the Bible talks about temptation. What you think is not wrong. What you do with it, that's a problem, right? And so keeping that out off my corner is most important and most productive for me. But if I want to go out and use, and I go out and use, that to me feels like I'm in control. I have freedom. I'm making the decision. But in reality, that addiction it's calling all the shots.
Oh, you're 100% a slave, but it feels like you're the most kick-ass badass in the land. When the opposite is true, it's hideous. It's a hideous problem.
Yeah, it's
It's
terrible. Yeah. And so you believe we can prevent addiction if we can if so let me ask you this. Can we develop can the development of these patterns be identified before the symptoms, and will that prevent addiction?
sure. That was the big surprise I found out because as I developed this map model, this empowerment model, I was showing them here are the 5 stages, and of
Hmm.
course the first couple of stages are benign. And the difference is in stages, most people, I believe 75 out of 100, will decide then if it's high risk or not and high benefit or not. They
Right.
don't continue to experiment. They do one experiment and decide, and they either retain whatever they're experimenting with. Could be a new relationship, could be a new car, could be
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
and decide right then, no, this is bullshit. I'm not doing it, or yes, this is something I'll be doing the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not fooled by the benefits, the advertised benefits, the false benefits.
Yeah.
Uh, and but some of us are, and there may be other things involved in that, like we talk about trauma and all these kinds of things. Uh, So it's no wonder when somebody finds something that makes them feel good, they might be interested.
Right, right. And that's that pain outweighing the benefit stuff. It's like we don't track that. It's all feelings based. We go with it, and like you said before, before we know it, it's a problem. And when it's a problem, it's too late. At that point,
Well,
it's not you're not it's not the end all, but it's certainly more difficult to make some turnaround in that moment because you've got this deep rut of routine and tradition, or not tradition, but routine and pattern of behavior that's deep seated and become so compulsive. I can't tell you how many times I got up and grabbed a drink on the way to work just because that's what I do in the morning, And I didn't
uh,
even want one. Like I'd feel nauseous, I'd feel sick. I wasn't really, I wasn't craving. It's just like my car would just go there and I would purchase the alcohol. It's crazy.
we cling to the familiar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't want to be, caught without your supply, And so we protect that and honor it and worship it, and become a slave to it.
Yeah.
But the it's easy to track the mental progression because you can see it. You can start out, you get like you say, you get a little impulsive, and then you get compulsive, and then you get obsessive. So those don't happen. You don't start out an obsession. You got to work at it. It's like
Yeah.
anything else in life.
You got to work at
You got to. Addiction doesn't come easy. Addiction is not for wimps.
it. Oh
You
man,
got to sacrifice.
I love your perspective, man. I can't tell you when I first met you, first ran across your work, I there was a part of me I was like, this guy's just lost it. He's just he's out of his head. He doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. And I can't tell you how many times I really thought, oh, he's just looking for a new something he wants to put out there and make money off of or whatever. And then I found out the kind of guy you were, and it's not about money or anything. And then I started looking at the research and stuff. And as many times as I watched the YouTube video you have about the model, and I want to make sure our listeners can get to all that before we finish up today. It makes sense. Like I was thinking about it in my own life and just tracking back my own behavior. I'm like, dude, this guy's onto something. This makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's the beauty of research. If you get a random sample, that's where I got lucky. I was saved from this selection bias that all of our friends go through because they
Yeah.
work solely on the end of the continuum. They have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah.
Nobody studies the healthy people, which I get, I understand, and I was in a university setting, so I couldn't exclude the healthy people. I included everybody.
Right, right, right.
And you
So,
can see the mental progression and the physical progression, same thing.
yeah.
Very easy to see. You start out, you like what you're doing, you do it more, that increases tolerance. Eventually you maximize tolerance so you can do huge quantities, and
Hmm.
and eventually your body changes to where if you don't have it, you get sick. And
Yeah.
that's withdrawal.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing, gotta work at it.
Yeah.
What I didn't know was the organization of these risk response factors.
Hmm.
And the big finding, maybe the biggest finding this century, was this is literally where fear comes from. These are these guys I just happened to trip over in my literature review doing research.
Hmm.
And the more I ran into them, the more I was like, boy, these guys are onto something. They explain a lot. They talk, and I talk like them. So when I really sound crazy, I'm really just talking like these other guys because they found out. They said humans are not only are they not rational, they're they're nowhere. They're not even in the ballpark. They're not even close to being rational. But we can look rational and we can use logic, but we just don't use it very well.
Right.
So what do we use? Well, we use these little tricks that help us reduce cognitive loads. I can't struggle over, we make 1,000 decisions every hour. I
Hmm.
can't I can't struggle over these things. And yet I gotta make good decisions to keep going.
Yeah.
So what do we
Yeah.
do? Well, we're very good at noticing the new. we're very good at hanging on to the familiar that is healthy, or we think
Yeah.
it's healthy, or
Yeah.
works for us.
Right.
Uh, we're very good at committing. We're very good at control. But if you don't really know what you can and cannot control and how healthy what your commitment is, and it's all driven by risk and benefit. All these
Yeah.
other factors affect one pair of factors, risk and benefit.
Yeah.
And
Bottom
what I
line.
learned from this research is there's not a continuum of risk. There's a continuum of risk and benefit. So
Uh-huh.
the further away you get away from benefit, the higher risk you get, and the higher benefit is, the lower the risk is.
Right. Right.
Just by nature of the how it works. So if you're
There's
not aware of that, or you fooled yourself one way or the other, and fear takes hold, all comes down to fear, really.
yeah.
Then the change is incredibly hard if you wait long enough. But if you show somebody how they've organized these things and where they get them out of step, in stage two is kind of where the decisions made. I can control outcomes. I can
Hmm.
control how I feel, and I like it, and I like the crowd I do it with, and I'm going to say no to a lot of other things
Yeah.
because this is safe, low risk, and it's exciting, and I'm learning the things all I've been dreaming about for a long time, and they're coming true. So whatever this is I'm doing now, I'm not changing. So you got somebody developing right into stage two that will take you right into stage four, which is addiction. And that's how they move. They move between stage two and four. I've seen it in classes, every class I've done. And what I didn't notice at first, but I had to I knew I found something. I didn't know what it was. So I had to write a book just to see what I found. Nobody else could tell me. They look at me. So I went in, and the most of the class, 75% of the class, will always answer these three questions in similar ways. What stage were you at? What stage are you at? And what stage will you be at?
Hmm.
Researchers have a hard time measuring things over time. They like to do pre-tests and post-tests, and it never works very well because the attrition is horrible. They never catch up with everybody. And if they die in the meantime, they don't get to vote. So you
Yeah.
never really know what you're measuring.
And it's interesting to me that you have, obviously, if we can get folks educated on this pattern, this routine, these patterns that form, and what to do with them, where they lead, what causes them, etc., and flip that perspective. That's really where the power is at. Otherwise, we continue to ask ourselves the question: why is Brian and Johnny in the same scenario at the same time with the same choices? Brian chose cocaine. Johnny did it once and never did it again and never went the direction of addiction. But Brian, for some reason, just couldn't keep that stuff out of his nose for some reason. That's a big question.
Exactly. Uh-huh. Baffling. What's going on here? Well, it's very easy. It's very simple. One of them is mistaking a uh, autonomous pattern. They're mistaking a dependent pattern for autonomy.
Yeah.
They're in a dependent pattern, but it feels autonomous.
Yeah.
That's a hard one to shake. You can't shake that one by yourself.
Yeah.
And if you can't see it, it's just not going to change. And that's the heartbreaking thing where the parents, spend $350,000 on their kids, and they get into rehab. And they go to 12-step groups, and they do the work, and they get some measure of sobriety for a while. But if they don't know, they don't understand the psychic change in the 12-step group, or they don't get their change from this autonomy to dependence thing, they're going to die, which
Yeah.
is exactly what happens. And they're like, how
Yeah.
could all these people who have helped my kids, and they come home and overdose?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's
after
sad.
they're, speakers, and they lead communities, and, naltrexone meetings and stuff. And
Right.
it's
It,
horrible.
it is horrible. And so the other thing about all this, that's one of the pieces that it was helpful for me to see the model because it helped me answer that question for myself. And now I share this a lot of time in groups. I've done it with groups down in Florida when we talked before, and at treatment centers I was in, and still share it with individual clients and have them go look at the video and we talk it through as well. And it's been very helpful. I very much was blown away by who is at most risk of hospitalization or death. Tell us about that. That was something I didn't expect.
Yeah, I didn't either. It's a trick. It's a thing. It's another thing humans aren't very good at. Statistics is problematic. That's why we have statistics to stop us from guessing. We never tire of. We call them swags in sales. You know, when I was at work, we knew we were crazy. We knew what we didn't know, but it didn't stop us from guessing.
Right.
So we call them swags, right? Silly wild ass guess. 'Cause sometimes that's all we had to go with, right?
I love it.
So it's the same here. When I saw that 75% of the students never got past stage one, it's like, well, what are they doing? Because what happens is they don't fit in the model. It's a
Hmm.
broken model. I can't see how they're using their risk response factors because they
Right.
don't advance through the model. They, it's broken. It's a broken. So I was relieved. It's like maybe I can stop doing this stuff. I found the error. I found the mistake, but it took me about 60 seconds to fix it because I can then step back and say, all right, let's take all of the risk response. There's hundreds of these heuristics, they call them, or risk response factors, or rules of thumb, even they
Right.
call. But
Yeah.
I only need about six to prove addiction or autonomy. And what they do is they use those six between 0 and 1. They bounce between 0 and 1. It's a
Yeah.
different model.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if so, if you show somebody in stage 2 or 3 that, they can do that. They
Yeah.
can move. They're not. They might need a little counseling. They might have to get over a little bit of fear. I love talking to those guys. I had a football player. He's like, when am I going to, marijuana? He goes, I've ruined myself. It's been a month since I quit, and I'm still fucked up. Is it going to be this way the rest of my life? Should I kill
Yeah.
myself? He's like,
Yeah.
take it easy.
Take it easy. But now you're recreating new patterns. That takes time. So,
That's true.
for the sake of time, Pat, this model, folks, if you're listening and this doesn't make any sense to you, didn't make sense to me either. I want these folks to go check out your video and more information about you, so they can reach out with questions and better understand what exactly Prehab Map is about. So, um, where can these folks go? How can they find more information about your
Thank
research and
you.
about you?
Yes.
So tell our listeners where they can find more information about the research and how to reach you.
What I've done is put a bunch of links on one page. So if you want to see the research posters I've done on a national level, it shows you every step of the research, how I measure it, who is involved, where I got. If you want to see the bibliography, I highly recommend reading about this risk response stuff. All the, if you look, they're all Pulitzer Prize winners,
Yeah,
and nobody pays attention. And the funny thing about some of them is what they found is astounding, but they don't know how to apply it.
yeah,
They have no idea how to apply this to addiction.
yeah. And
They
that's
they
all.
yeah,
And that big chain of information. I think I've seen it on your site. It's kind of a still page, but it's the prehabmap.com. Is that where they go?
that is map is with two P's, so it's prehabmap.com, and you can buy the book there. You can look at the research, different articles, different podcasts. I'll put your podcast up there, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And you
perfect.
can contact me about anything.
Yeah, rock and roll. Pat's a good guy to have in your corner. You can also reach Patrick Moore on LinkedIn. So, hey, thanks for joining us today, Pat. It's good to see you, brother. I'm going to cover a couple other things here, but love for you to hang out with us as I continue.
Rock and roll.
If you're interested in engaging with a therapist, you can find more information online at 247dct.org. So don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to join you today, sorting out all that stuff that seems hopeless and get you back on track. That brings us to Real Talk with Brian, and this week's encouragement is brought to you by Russell Brand, who I'm a big fan of, who said the priority of any addict is to anesthetize the pain of living to ease the passage of day with some purchased relief. That to him is addiction. I believe from my own journey with addiction that addiction is definitely fueled by unresolved, deep-seated issues, often trauma-based, that create this cage that you feel forced to operate in, and that's that compulsive side of addiction. And with seemingly limited resources, that cause terminal short-sightedness, which feeds that whole addictive process. Is right. So you find yourself trapped in this cycle, and therein lies the nightmare that is addiction. But with proper healing and understanding of the true meaning of autonomy, you too can reclaim your life by ending the chase and kissing your monster on the nose, as I call it. So reach out today and let 24/7 DCT walk you through what that looks like, folks. Be sure to follow my weekly trilogy series on LinkedIn at hashtag #BeRealWithBrian to gain insight in the areas of mental health, addiction, and general wellness. I appreciate everyone that joined us today. If you're interested in gaining practical advice and expert insights for living your best life, join us weekly on Let's Talk Mental Health for support and to connect with others that genuinely understand what you're going through. Again, you can check us out on all major social media platforms by searching 24/7 DCT and online at 247dct.org. We look forward to spending time with you next week as we welcome yet another guest who's committed to getting you feeling better.